Welcome to the Houston Southeast YouTube channel. The district is excited to partner with Filet Inc., a Houston Southeast business, in supporting your efforts as you seek federal, state, and local funding for your business. Visit houstonse.org to learn more about the Business Retention Stabilization Initiative. This is your district at work.
Hey, small business owners, as I promised, we're back again working on the PPP loan forgiveness. This time we're going to use form 3508 EZ. Okay, this form is going to actually require a lot of calculations. Okay, so you got to be prepared. Mind you, if you do have a good payroll provider, you actually can find some of these reports that are necessary to fill this application out on their website, or you can contact them. They can send you the documentation to make this a lot easier. But in the event you don't, here's some things that I think would be beneficial. A profit and loss statement. However, only if it's been reconciled and it is accurate for the period, which is considered your covered period, which we'll get into a little bit later in the application. A payroll summary in the event you do your own payroll. Depending if you don't have a provider, again, if you have a provider, they have a lot of information. As a matter of fact, I have a report that I'm going to show you guys that actually came from a provider. And a calendar of your activity. For instance, the time frame of when you received your funds, some of your lending paperwork would be necessary. Things that actually give you the information from when you receive the money so that you can have that information available for the application. Okay, like always, I suggest looking at the actual payroll protection application instructions. Okay, the instructions kind of break down step by step things that are important when you're trying to complete this application. Okay. So let's get started. All right, so we're going to use the company I love the most, which is Wally World, LLC. And this time Wally World does have a DBA. And Wally World's DBA is going to be Wally World Funplex. Okay, our address, which I suggest sticking to things that you, addresses and information that you actually prepared your original application on. It sounds like you may be thinking, well, what does she mean? Why would my address change? Well, a lot of times people will use multiple addresses. Sometimes people will try to use P.O. boxes. Some people may have things that go to their home address versus a work address. I would try to keep my application for forgiveness in line with my original PPP application. Okay. Business TIN, EIN, SSN. Again, this is the tax ID number or the employer ID number or your social security number. This number is 9 digits. And we're going to do a phone number here. I have no problem giving my phone number out because you guys can call me anytime to actually have your taxes prepared or bookkeeping or whatever else you need. That was a plug. Anyway, so primary contact, this is the person who actually is responsible for filing this report. It is very important to make sure or try to keep this person the same as the person who actually signed the original application. That way you don't have any pushback. And we're going to use Mr. Joe Jack, whose email address is joejack@wallyworld.com. Okay. SBA PPP loan number you were given a PPP loan number when you received your initial paperwork. That's why it's important to kind of have that paperwork in front of you. I'm not sure if the numbers are the same. I know I've seen the numbers end up being like 9599. I've seen some numbers like that. So we're gonna kind of stick to those numbers. Stay on the safe side. The lender, because this is an actual loan that the lender is giving you, your lender could have been the bank you went to, it could have been one of these merchant services, it could have been a credit union, anyone you went to actually get these funds is considered your lender. And they may have a number that's different from the SBA's PPP loan number. So you would need that number in front of you as well. In our case, we're just gonna use the same number. Okay. And of course, if you received a PPP, you know how much you actually received. We're just gonna make up something here. All right, and the next thing is when the funds were distributed or dispersed to you. And that, I would just say, go with the day that you actually either received the check, put it in the bank, it came through the bank account. All of those will be your disbursement dates. And for us, we're gonna say our disbursement date is 04. Let's see, 2020. I'm gonna stay in line with the instruction paperwork so I could help you guys understand how that works. Okay, and then we have our employees at the time of the loan application. Now, if you're filing and you were the only employee, this number would be 1, even though for most sole member entities other than an S Corp or a Corp, you could not be an employee, but that's kind of what the name that we give for this particular application. So if you had 12 employees, you put 12 in that number. Then it says employees at the time of the forgiveness. So you had 12 employees probably from January through March-ish, or January through February. You may have had 12 employees, and then at the time of the forgiveness, your number may have dropped, or you may have added people. Whatever the case may be, that number is actually what you put here. We're gonna say we added 1 employee. Okay. Now, we get down to the EIDL, advanced amount. So what this amount is, and I got to bring you guys back to remember this. So in the very beginning of all of this COVID, and we're going to get some money from the SBA, the SBA gave us the opportunity to go and fill out a economic injury disaster loan. That's the EIDL. And what they said was, hey, we have up to $10,000 available for you if you need these funds. And when you come out and fill out this application, which was for a loan, we actually will allow you to take this money up front. You don't have to worry about paying it back. It's a grant while we process your loan agreement, which, by the way, if this happened to you, you might want to go look in your email, because you might have had a loan that was offered to you. I had a lot of people who didn't realize that that loan was sitting there because they thought they were only getting this advance money. The other thing was people thought it was $10,000, but they misread that. It was up to $10,000. So what the government said is, if we will give you, and I think it came after the fact, but they said we'll give you $1,000 per employee that you have, max 10,000. So if you had 1 employee, you got $1,000. In our case, in this application, we have 12 employees, so we received $10,000. And we did get that EIDL loan, by the way. Now, when you receive this advance, and you processed the paperwork for the loan, you received a application number. And that application number, most of them that I've seen started with the 33. It may have been other numbers. I don't know if it was based on state or based on where it was, but I know for us, I saw the 33 numbers. So we're gonna go ahead and put that there. That needs to match up because they need to go in and actually get all those records together. Okay, the next thing is the payroll schedule. So how did your payroll take place? Was it weekly? Was it bi-weekly? Was it twice a month? Was it monthly? Other? How did you actually make your payments? For the sake of this, we're gonna say we did twice a month. Okay, our next area is your covered period. Okay, so I have an illustration available to help you understand what the covered period is. And on this illustration, I'm having two things because, let me go back to this application to show you. Notice that you have covered period, and right underneath you have alternative payroll covered period, okay? I'm gonna explain to you the difference, okay? So in yellow is our payroll period. And what we have chosen was the 24-week time frame, okay? So our covered period for that 24-week process is here in yellow. So what we did was we used the instructions number to kind of illustrate what they meant. Okay, so basically, let's just say the funds were released to you or dispersed to you, as the application said, on April the 20th. Okay, 24 weeks from April 20th would put you on October the 4th. And so what we've done here is illustrated how those weeks took place to get you to the 4th, okay? And that becomes your 24-week period. The other option, which is the alternative payroll period, allows you to actually take your first payroll date after you receive the funds. So let's just say you received the funds on the 20th, but you didn't make your first payroll until the 26th, okay? If you did that, right here where you see this yellow, it would actually be yellow or green because in this case, we're trying to cover that period, but let's just assume it was green, but we started our week on the 2nd, which we started on the 26th, and we're going out to our first pay period was between the week of the 26th through the 2nd. So our first week starts on the 2nd, okay? And then our 24 week period starts at that point. So if we actually had a payroll that was started, first date was the 26th, our actual end of that alternative period would be October the 10th, okay? So when we go back to the application, if we wanted to use that period, we'd move down here to the alternative period. I'm gonna just go ahead and use the covered period because I feel like a lot of people will use that unless they're trying to get an extra week. So we're gonna say 04/20/2020, and that will put us at October the 4th, 2020 per our schedule, okay? Now, here's where our calculations start. Well, just before we get there, it's a very important question right here. If borrower, together with affiliates, if applicable, receive PPP loans in excess of $2 million, click check here. Okay, so when they say affiliates, we're filling out this application for one company. But if we happen to have multiple companies, then we would have to actually go out and fill this same application out for multiple companies. Even if we were a director at a nonprofit, we would have to actually include that as well. So what the goal is to calculate from all of the companies that you actually deal with to see what the amount is total that was provided to you, and make sure that it's not in excess of $2 million. It can be, but you have to actually tell the application that. You have to literally check there. So what's cool is the payroll provider, most of these payroll providers actually have reports to help you. So if you use someone like ADP or Paychecks or Gusto or some of these other companies, they've already devised and designed a lot of these forgiveness reports to accommodate you in filling this information out. You may have to add a few things to it, but for the most part, they've already done it for you. So that would make your life like so much easier if you actually had those reports available to you. So here's a report that actually allows us to kind of see how this works. And what they did was they actually took all of the information. All we had to do was provide the date and some of the application numbers, that type of thing, and it actually did most of the calculations for us. So that's something to keep in mind if you have a payroll provider that can allow that has those reports. Okay, but we're going to come over here and we're just going to do our physical calculations for the people who don't have those reports available to you. Okay, so we get down here to the forgiveness amount calculation, and our first line is our payroll cost. So if we did go out and we provided, and our payroll company provided this number, or we had our own number, you want to place that number here, and in our case, it is $146,896.78. Okay. And here is where you would choose, it says business mortgage interest payments. So if you own your property, you actually are paying mortgage interest. When you pay your note, you pay your principal, you pay your interest. And this line is allowing you to write off your mortgage interest payment. So your P&L would be great if you can grab it and it's accurate and you can pull that information out. In our case, for the sake of time and simplicity, we're going to say we don't have any mortgage interest. Okay. Number 3, business rent and lease payments. So most businesses have a physical location, and we're going to calculate based on the time frame of that covered period. Again, that P&L would be so beneficial at this moment, just to pull that number off and be done with it. But let's just say you don't have that number, and you need to decide how your number is going to come together. So you would take that covered period, you look at your rent payment for that particular time frame, and you decide whether your rent fit into that time frame. So for instance, we're saying that we actually started this process on April the 20th. Starting it on April the 20th means that if we paid our rent on the 5th, it's not going to be inside this covered period. Okay, unfortunately. So you would have to go in and maybe catch May, if that's the case. So when I calculated what we had, I came up with, based on the time frame, and I really think that might be something that may come up in one of these, a lot of people are waiting before they fill this out. Maybe that'll come up and somebody might say, hey, no, you go ahead and take the whole month since you're in the month. That'd be great. But right now, based on what they're saying, it sounds like you would have to be within that covered period. But rules can be broken. Business utility payments. So same thing, P&L would be great, but if you don't, having your utility statements such as electricity bills, water bills, gas bills. I even think we can throw in internet, phone. Those are typically utilities when you actually have a physical location, or they can be. You can fight the concept to say that could be. So in this case, we're going to use it, and our monthly utility bills are like $1,539. We're going to assume they're in this time frame, and we'll make the entry for that. Okay, and the next thing we do is we take all of these items and we actually add them up for our line 5. So we grab a calculator. And we're doing 146, 896, 71 plus 26, 250 plus 76, 95. And that's going to give us 180, 841. $41.78. And then here on line 6, we put our actual original PPP loan amount, which in our case is $89,700. And then here's one of those easy calculations, but we still have to do it. We're gonna take the 146, 896, 78, and we're gonna divide that number by 0.60. And that number is going to end up being 244,827.97. Okay. Now, final, line 8, forgiveness amount. So line 8 says, enter the smallest of line 5, 6, and 7. Well, line 5 is 180,000. Line 6, 89,000. Line 7, 244,000. So obviously our smallest amount ends up being 89,700, which is our forgivable amount. So our 100% of our loan has been forgiven. So understand, if some of these numbers changes, like for instance, if this payroll number was to go down significantly to the point where you that 60% does not land in the right place or on the right platform or the right number, you actually can end up having some of the original amount forgiven. In some cases, you can end up having none of it forgiven. We're going to go down now and start talking about some of these questions that might bring some of that out, where you realize that none of it is forgiven. So at the end of getting your calculation, you know you're ready to go. Everything seems great. Now you got to make sure you qualify. Okay. So one of the first things they talk about is the dollar amount for which forgiveness is requested. So and I'm going to run through this really quickly in layman's terms and try to give you guys an understanding of what this is. So the first thing is, but were the funds used to pay costs that were eligible for forgiveness, which was the payroll cost, the mortgage interest, the business rent or lease payments, or your business utilities. Does the amount include payroll costs equal to at least 60% of the forgiveness amount? Number 3, if a 24-week covered period, which is what we chose, not to exceed 2.5 months worth of 2019 compensation for any owner, employee, or self-employed individual, capped at $20,833 per individual. Let me explain to you why that particular number. Early on in your forgiveness and your application for PPP, it said that no one person could make or exceed $100,000 in payroll. Okay, so if you take $100,000 and you divide it by 12 and you multiply that by 2.5, you get exactly $2,833. Okay, that's where that number comes from. And that's the number that we chose to go with. Okay. And if we're okay with these items, we initial in this box. Number 2, and again, I'm just gonna kind of fly through this. I don't want to read verbatim. We did that early on with the 3508S. So if you want this reading to go on, you can go back and check that out. But we're gonna fly through this really quickly. So number 2, accurately verify the payments for the eligible payroll and non-payroll. So you accurately verified that this information is correct. One second. Oh, I gotta start over on that. Now we get down to verifying that we actually did everything we were supposed to do, and we align with all of the rules and regulations for these funds, okay? And so the SBA is asking us to initial next to all of these items to confirm that we actually meet the requirements for this forgiveness, okay? So the first one talks about the types of expenses that we know are eligible for forgiveness. We went over this a million times. I'm not going to read that. The 24-hour covered period is what I'm going to explain, because that's the one we use for this application. Basically, if you read along, you'll find that this number was capped at $20,833 per individual. The reason for that number is basically early on in the application process, you probably read that no one individual can exceed a salary of $100,000. So if you take that $100,000, you divide it by 12, you multiply it times 2.5, you get exactly $20,833. No one person can exceed that number. So we have to verify that took place. Similar concept with the 8-week covered period, with the capped at $15,385 per person. Okay. Next item is ensuring that we didn't knowingly use these funds for unauthorized purposes. Okay, very important. Number 3, the borrower did not reduce salaries or wages by more than 25% during that covered period. In other words, from January to March, you had a certain amount. If you did not, you want to ensure that you did not decrease anybody's pay by more than 25%. So you may have had to, make some pay adjustments to stay in business, keep everybody working, but as long as you didn't go beyond that 25%. We accurately verified payments for the eligible payroll and non-payroll expenses. That means that you have documentation for that information. You verified it, and then the next one talks about that the lender may require documentation verifying, which, let me fix that. The lender will request the documentation for the PPP forgiveness. So you will submit that to that lender, verified documents of payroll costs and any other existing obligations that line up with the PPP forgiveness rules. Again, that could be stuff like canceled paychecks, canceled rent checks, lease payments. It could be a lease agreement with the checks paid. You definitely have to show that those funds that you said you used went through their bank account and made it to the parties that they needed to make it to, i.e. your landlord, your employee, your utility companies, etc., mortgage company. The next one talks about basically what happens if you don't do what you're supposed to do. So you knowingly make a false statement to obtain forgiveness for an SBA guarantee loan. And if you do that, it's punishable under the law. Okay, you can read and look at those little certs to make sure you understand what your liability is. The next one, the tax documents that were submitted to the lender are consistent with those borrower has submitted to the IRS or any other state agency. So if you said you received these funds and you are providing documentation that these individuals that you gave funds to are employees, the SBA and your lender would expect to see that documentation turned into the Internal Revenue Service. There's no way you paid an employee and did not file a 941. There's no way you actually had a certain amount of money that you said that you had for payroll or rent or any of these entities, but you didn't file a tax return with that information on it. They're gonna match that up, okay? And that's very important that you understand that. The other item is that you understand, acknowledge, and agree that the SBA may request additional information. So at any point in time, if they feel some kind of way about the documentation and information you provided, they may pry and ask you for some more information. Be prepared. Then we drop down and it says, in addition, the authorized representative of the borrower must certify by initialing at least one of the following items. The first one is the borrower did not reduce the number of employees or the average pay hours of employees between January 2020 and the end of the covered period. It goes on to explain a little bit more of that. Or you can go to the next one. The borrower was unable to operate between February 15, 2020 and the end of the covered period. And you again could go on and read some more about that. One of those has to be initial, okay? Okay, now we drop to the bottom of the application, page 2 anyway, and we sign, we print our name. This has to be an authorized person, your date, your title. You want to try to make sure that that same authorized person is the same person who started the application. That would be great to keep that person the same so you have no issues with the application. Once we sign, we're done. We're ready to go, and you're off to the races on your forgiveness.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel.